And so in my journey, we started off as small teams that were focused on web applications, and in the early days, we were doing mobile CD-ROMs and those things. And then over time, the engagement increased. Yeah, I see you laughing. Some people may not even know what a CD-ROM is anymore, right?
Hello and welcome everyone to the next episode of the Media House podcast, Simulated Reality. Today we have with us Tarun Mathur. Hi Tarun, how are you doing today?
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So Tarun, before we jump into the topic that we are going to discuss about, the entire utilization of data-driven technologies in life sciences, can you tell us a little bit about how it was, your journey in life sciences? You've been in the industry for so many years. And what are some of the stark differences in terms of operations, logistics, or any other function in this, right? So that we can probably lay the premise as to what we are going to talk about. And then maybe we can move on to the questions.
Sure. So I've been in this enterprise life sciences space for a little over 25 years. And I began actually from a background focused on e-learning. Actually, that was my main area of interest, was how can we do a more effective job of teaching over the wire, if you will, right? And this was back in the 90s. And that led to some interesting innovation and insights into how we can actually not just teach, but how you actually communicate digitally. And the timing was good, right? And so at that period of time, life sciences industry was looking at Salesforce training is where things started, but then also thinking about how you digitally engage better. And so my company, the original company I was with, was founded by physicians and entrepreneurs. So we had the medical background. My background I'm a physics background, but a concentration in the medical side was been deeply plugged into that. So it became clear to us that the opportunity to convey that kind of content and information through a new medium at that time was the way to go. And so my journey began by thinking about e-learning and then upgrading that to just general digital communication, how you instrument things, measure it, how you make it more effective. And then in 2005 is when the company that I had started in the 90s with a couple of colleagues got acquired by Indegene. And so there we saw the opportunity to really leverage technology in a differentiated way. And we positioned ourselves from day one. We always positioned ourselves at that intersection of domain expertise and technologies. We had lots of physicians and other medical and business experts coupled with technologists. And so we wanted to just keep investing in that intersection. And so in my journey, we started off as small teams that were focused on web applications, and in the early days, we were doing mobile CD-ROMs and those things. And then over time, the engagement increased. Yeah, I see you laughing. Some people may not even know what a CD-ROM is anymore, right? Then over time, as we got we were able to demonstrate about this intersection of domain and tech more effectively, then the industry started to accelerate in interesting ways that we were able to ride along with that, and eventually start pushing it in the direction as well. And so what we went from our just engineering teams working with domain experts to then more cross-functional teams. And then I basically started off, with team size of 10 up to, the hundreds of people there's in the engineering group. And now Indegene is, roughly 5,000 plus employees, right? So it's a very different company, but the journey was very interesting. It was always with the lens of life sciences, exclusively focused on that. What are the trend lines? How do we exploit that intersection of domain and tech better to get better outcomes for patients or caregivers, and of course for the business stakeholders as well? So very interesting journey. The role has certainly changed. My title has always been the same, Chief Technology Officer, but the role within the organization certainly has evolved to keep pace with these tech inflection points and the changing industry needs.
Yeah, I think this will be a very interesting conversation, because you have been right at the center of technology and life sciences. And, over a period of time in the last 25 to 30 years, the last 3 years especially, have been definitive in terms of definitive in terms of technology having its impact on different sectors, right? So, for example, retail had its own kind of revolution. BFSI had its own. BFSI was digitized in a lot of ways, because the transactions happened online. But retail, especially, or manufacturing, And while technologies were adopted in similar manner, the applications or how they were adopted was very different, right? Can you help us kind of you know walk us through that journey of 25 years in terms of how digital technologies evolved, in specifically in terms of life sciences, which functions they impacted the most, and what are some of its implications on your role as well as some of the people who are working on the consumer side of things?
Yeah, no, that's actually very fascinating. And most of us who have some familiarity with enterprise life sciences will probably would acknowledge that the industry tends to be a little bit laggard on the technology, right? Where while something new comes out, the pace of adoption and its impact on the industry tends to trail some other industries, right? And I think that's rightfully so, just given the nature of healthcare and the risks involved and just how those functions work. It's good to be careful and measured. But we have seen this disruption. So I remember the inflection to cloud computing, right? So that took a little bit of time for pharma to really embrace it, but then they go all in. That impacted the value chain, the entire drug life cycle, right? Across the board was impacted by it. Then we moved up to big data, right? Big data analytics. All of a sudden you see a huge impact. Part of it was on the R&D side, but there was a huge impact on the commercial end of things, because now they're starting to, at the same time, starting to rethink how we digitally engage with physicians and patients, and you're dealing with the broader ecosystem of channels and data sources and questions about personalization, those things. And so you needed to start looking at and embracing this big data, and that infrastructure came in. Then we saw the acceleration of machine learning fall into this space. So here, again, all elements of the drug life cycle are impacted of it. We at our organization certainly saw the major impact on the commercial side, because the pressures on there were ones that machine learning had a clear and very visible and tangible ROI for adopting it. But we also see its impact on like MedInfo, right? Search and retrieval against unstructured documents, natural language processing impacted there. And in the early stage R&D through clinical trials, prediction algorithms trying to predict if patients are going to fall off protocol or not. So you saw these major kind of technology inflection points be adopted. Generally speaking, the quickest to adopt were the commercial teams, but it would have a ripple effect all the way through the entire life cycle. Today, we're seeing it happen again, right? So the whole kind of viral nature of GenAI that's sweeping the world, it's pharma is impacted by it as well, and so we're seeing similar type of disruption to the value chains associated with each step of the drug life cycle. They're being heavily reevaluated, and some areas are just going to be transformed in some meaningful way. Some areas will be completely disrupted, but we're already seeing that happen. So I don't think this has been isolated to any specific function necessarily. But at least our experience has been we generally start to see a quick adoption and quick results from commercial side of the business, but then it kind of ripples and affects the entire stream ultimately.
Fantastic. And now that you have kind of painted the picture a little bit, right, I want to dive into the topic of discussion today, which is essentially the life sciences commercialization, right? First, can you help our audience understand what this terminology means exactly? What is life sciences commercialization, right? And then what are some of the digital first strategies that evolved around it in line with some of the things that you answered in the previous two questions? Also, if you could share a particularly, an interesting, if you can give us an anecdote to kind of help us and make us understand it a bit easier, that would be really helpful.
Yeah. So when we refer to commercialization, what we're talking about is after a drug has gone through discovery, clinical research, development, manufacturing, when you're finally bringing it to market, how do you get it into the hands of physicians? How do you educate physicians about the benefits and the appropriate use of your new product? In today's world, we're dealing with precision medicine and personalized healthcare. That means we also have a responsibility towards the patients, making sure that they're educated and have the correct information and it's timely and up to date. I also kind of broaden that field a bit more because it includes medical information or medcom. So physicians may have certain medical inquiries or questions. And so what are the services a pharma company has to have in place in order to support those. And there's a pharmacovigilance side of things, which is finally, once a drug is out there and in being used, the pharma companies have a responsibility to monitor the drug for safety events and risks and report those to the health authorities and take appropriate action in a very timely and responsible way. So all of those things kind of put together create the kind of the umbrella of the commercialization story of the pharma companies, and it's a major initiative. So, you can spend billions of dollars developing the product, but unless you have the right way to commercialize it, you're not going to see any return on that, right? So I certainly look at it from the business lens. It's the pharma companies have to do it, but also from the patient and caregiver side of things. It's important for them to know what are the latest and best treatments available. Maybe there's some new product that's come out that's more cost effective or has less tolerability issues for a patient. If your physician doesn't know about it, then it doesn't help. So the ability for a pharma company to engage, particularly with physicians and prescribers, right? And what we measure are, broadly speaking, two things. One is the script, and so how many prescriptions are written for your new product. And then you also look at adherence. That means are patients, if they're prescribed a certain treatment plan, are they staying on the treatment plan? Are they continuing to refill their medications, right? So from those two dimensions, we kind of look at business outcomes. Each of those, of course, has many corollaries attached to it. And so from our side, Indegene has historically been really focused on this commercialization part of things. We do some work on the early stage clinical research and clinical trials, but the heavy lifting has certainly been on commercialization of products, because if you're able to get successful commercial outcomes at a lower cost and burden for the pharma company, that actually frees up resources that can go into fueling more drug research and create better programs. Ultimately, all of these things are linked to better patient outcomes, better HCP information and information management. So we see the business benefit of having a strong commercialization partner goes hand in hand with the overall industry or overall landscape of improving patient outcomes. They go hand in hand together. So that's really where it comes out. And you asked for example, we work with pretty much all of at least the major and most of the mid-tier size pharmaceutical companies on various aspects of the commercialization. So most physicians would have seen some sort of content produced by Indegene at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's important to kind of understand what exactly life sciences commercialization intends, right? What all it encapsulates. While we do have a fair bit of idea of what it means, and the name is giving in itself, but it's clear now that you've put clarity into the thought. I would like to ask you my next question, right? And this is from a perspective of specifically looking at data-driven technologies, right? We started with descriptive analytics, and today we are at GenAI, right? I'm sure 2025, 2026, we'll see something or the other because the landscape evolves so fast, especially in this world. Can you help us understand what life sciences commercialization meant in 2009, 2010, when data analytics was big? Then we moved to kind of inquisitive and predictive analytics, right? Which is data science from a perspective. Then we moved on to some AI models. Then we built scalable models. We wanted to scale some of the applications that we're building. So data engineering became crucial, which happened at the back end of this. And then in today's world, GenAI is kind of this thing. So while these technologies evolved from data analytics to GenAI, how has your work at Indegene evolved in terms of building the right applications and giving the right solutions for your customers? And what does this overall mean for the industry?
Yeah, so in the earlier days, when we talked about engaging with physicians in particular, it was really around what they call detailing, right? So you would have field reps who would actually go visit the doctor's office. You would spend just what looks like a slide presentation that's highly controlled and approved, gone through a med legal review. But the sales rep would have a small pitch with the doctor. They would leave samples, and you would start to build this kind of personal relationship, right? Usually the reps know their docs, and it was really driven around that kind of engagement model. Then over time, certainly the amount of time that a rep could spend with the doctor was shrinking. And we started to hear from physicians that they started to prefer at least a combination of human interaction with their rep with some digital content. Can you just send me a PDF or send me a research article that explains some of the the issues or events or tolerability issues of this product? Or hey, patients in my particular practice, they're very sensitive to cost issues, so send me some data around how your drug deals with the cost compared to your competitors. So they wanted to get more assets digitally, and they wanted more leave behinds that they could give to their patients. So can you give me something I can share with my patient, for example? So you started to see the expectations from the market to the pharma companies start to shift. And then, especially in the past few years with COVID and all that, everybody's eyes opened up saying, well, we don't have to spend all this time in person anyway. Maybe it's not even practical anymore. We're seeing huge, you look at digital health, where are the huge growth trends right there in telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, all of these kinds of digital interactions. So now the physicians are saying, I don't mind having a more digital relationship with the pharma company. It's not always the case, but it's certainly that balance has shifted from more of a field rep centric model towards one that is kind of hybrid between the two, and probably the pendulum has swung more towards the digital side. And actually today, if you look at today's data, that certainly is the case. So that means the role of companies like ours that have to go and work with the life sciences industry, we have to basically not express empathy, but respect that shift and make it happen. And so that's where we have certainly seen our role changed. You've gone from how do I create the best, highest quality, high fidelity detailing content that the rep can go take to the doctor's office, and then how do I put the right surveys in place to get information back, to now how do I rapidly create precise digital content that specifically addresses a question from a doctor. Maybe that digital content is self-service. The doctor can go submit a med inquiry and get a response back, or maybe he asks his rep by email or chat or whatever, and the rep can just hit a button and send that information to the doctor. And then how do you instrument the whole thing, right? So it's one thing to push content, but you need data back in order to tailor the experience for later on and do something. So what we've learned to do and what we would kind of adjust over time is that whole methodology of digital content from strategy to production, and a lot in production, and to measurement and the KPIs attached to it. That has evolved dramatically. And in the past number of years, our industry has been adopting something called a modular content approach. You have, because you go through a big investment, a lot of work to build the primary digital assets that get delivered to a doctor, right? It's not just some brand manager drafting up some notes. It goes through a very rigorous, drawn out process of creating the right content, through all the medical reviews, legal reviews, and then you have to think about the different demographics and targets where you're sending that content. So agencies create these assets, and now what you want to do is repurpose those assets in some way. That means break down those assets into reusable modules and reassemble them, right, following all the rules and compliance. So the technology to make that happen, the business processes to make that happen, the entire value chain from engagement strategy through engagement delivery has been basically transformed and disrupted in many ways. So we've been basically helping to design that framework, and that's where we see our changes happen with the pharma companies.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is essentially a series of factors coming together, right? It was not possible to kind of perform the data analysis or build some of the applications that you are currently building unless some factors about digitization came together. Similar is the case with GenAI as well, right? Today, when we see GenAI coming together, large language models or natural language processing as a technology existed before as well. Today, GenAI is coming together because there's a multitude of factors coming together, including computation power, etc. Right? What are some of the factors that came together for life sciences that enabled these technologies? At the same time, what are some of the factors that are still limiting what life sciences can potentially achieve, especially when it comes to leveraging, digitized data for data-driven technologies? And I want to ask this from a very specific for life sciences perspective. What are some of these things that you've observed?
Yeah, well, but GenAI is certainly a major kind of inflection point in our space, and there's a number of reasons why this is the case. So it's here you're talking about like you said, it's been around previously. Certainly, the algorithms are known, and you're absolutely right that now the computing power and the access to them have become democratized. And also previously, while the algorithms and models were in place, the pre-trained models weren't really in place. So we're talking about large language models specifically. And then you look at what, GPT-4, the upcoming GPT-5, you look at, there's a whole slew of these big models now, that the access to that compute power, the large pre-trained models, and an understanding of what it means for industry is kind of much more clear today. So in life sciences in particular, if you look at any one of the business functions, right, and we're talking about commercials, we can look at commercial content production and campaign management. So within there, you have a value chain that has a lot of decision making in there. There's complexity due to the nature of regulated content. There's validation of claims. Are those actually validated from the database and from the literature? All those things are manually intensive processes. And meanwhile, you have pressures to drive down timeline, drive down cost. So where do you make the trade-off? So that we talked about earlier about the intersection of domain and tech. Gen AI is exciting because it allows the technology, the AI technology, to be created by the right people, by domain experts. You're using domain-specific language. You're now coding in English instead of Python or R or C, and that kind of mindset is actually very transformative and disruptive to the way we normally think about these things. So when I look at what's happening in life sciences, there have been some legacy business processes that are in place that we've been running for decades, and we do that because even the best AI and the best automation technologies and rule-based systems and all those things in place, you put all those things, do not outperform the legacy process. So we're willing to spend the extra time and money on these processes because that reduces the risks. Now we can go back and re-examine that. And we're going back and we're saying, well, actually, some of those challenges we had in the past are potentially breakable, right? We can actually change those through generative AI. So we're very excited about it. And actually, Indegene adopted a Gen AI centric point of view very early on, right? So we jumped into this a while ago because it became, as a company that runs these services, right? We do managed services along with the technology. We are consumers of these platforms, right? We need them for our own operations, and it became clear that here is something new. And for life sciences, for example, one very specific, I'll give you a specific example. I talked about modular content. When you have details, or let's say even this a pharma created emailer, right? That has image or charts, it has text, it has the safety prescribing info. There's elements of that that are well known from the structure, highly controlled content. Now we talked about repurposing it. The ability to use AI to dissect and break that down and tag it and bring it in for repurposing through Gen AI far exceeds anything that was there before. So that's one kind of very specific example that makes a difference in the value chain. But in our case, the data ecosystem was already there. Pharma had already started investing in these big data analytics, data warehousing. Those elements were there. Now the Gen AI is opening up new opportunities and is causing us to re-examine the entire cycle. I'm thinking that's what you were asking about, but correct me if I'm not on the right direction.
I think that is essentially what I was asking. But one of the things that probably I would like to ask again is, what are some of the challenges today? Like, I know that there is a lot of factors are coming together in terms of building these data-driven technologies to a point where a lot, the potential seems endless. But what are some of the challenges today that kind of need a barrier to, reach the next phase and serve your clients better?
Yeah, so I'll talk about what we've seen, especially in the past, close to a year, when it's basically the challenges that are coming from the Gen AI kind of transformation.
Yeah.
So certainly, it's no secret across all industries we hear issues about biases and hallucination and those things. So in pharma and life sciences in particular, the risks associated with incorrect data, incorrect facts, that is certainly very high. So how do you mitigate those risks? That is a big question mark. And there are strategies for it, but the strategies for dealing with it, then you have to look at, well, if I implement all these mitigation strategies, am I still getting ROI out of it, right? And so that certainly is one part of it. The other part is it's such a new technology. There's a lot of misinformation about what the art of possible truly is. And if you come in from a pure technology lens, then you're actually missing a major part of the story. To really examine the true art of possible, it's that tech domain intersection. So if you don't have a organizational structure or working model that's able to capitalize on that intersection, you're not going to see the results, right? Or at least you're not going to be able to truly evaluate art of possible from what's real for life sciences versus what's hype, right? There are people who have a lot of assumptions about what this AI can do, which may not hold, may not be true today, right? I'm not saying what'll happen. Who knows what'll be tomorrow's model? And so being able to identify use cases, qualify the use cases for the domain, right? That is a big hurdle, right, for some companies to adopt. And I will add that we're seeing the companies have recognized this, right? So if you look at a lot of the major organizations, they've done restructuring. They've brought in chief digital officers, or in some cases, chief digital technology officers. They've put in place SWAT teams to kind of examine these cases. So they're aware of this problem, but there's still a long pathway to go before that becomes something that's scalable into real world production. And so that certainly is a big one, right? So we've been on one of our responsibilities in this space is to actually go through that education and work with the industry to kind of bridge that gap between separating the hype and the fiction from what real life sciences possibilities are.
Yeah, and that is from a technology perspective. And I want to ask you a slightly difficult question, right? Life sciences commercialization, while it entails, right, responsibility and understanding the market in a way where you take feedback and analyze data so that you can disseminate drugs or other medical facilities responsibly. But at the same time, it's also crucial for pharma companies to make money. They are businesses in the end, right? The data analytics or the data digitization or the GenAI or other technologies that you're building them are enabling them to do that better. But it's also very crucial for the ecosystem, including Indegene or other data science service providers or enterprise solution providers, as well as the pharma companies, to be responsible about it, right? While data-driven technologies can enable higher sales, we also need to understand some of the aspects of ethics and responsibility. The potential with which the potential of technologies like GenAI is tremendous, right? Earlier, we said technology was just an enabler, but as technology gets more intelligent, the scale at which it makes an impact is very high. How is Indegene kind of sort of making sure, and how is the overall industry from an industry perspective, that the nature of implications of your data-driven technologies that you're building for these enterprises are responsible and ethical?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and actually, that's top of mind for us when we're working with Gen AI, and we are making substantial investments. The way we approach it and the way we recommend it gets adopted and used is very much centered around responsible and ethical usage. And so there's a couple of things that we've put in place. One is we work with our domain experts to carefully craft the systems that are using Gen AI in a controlled way. These are not open-ended systems. It's not like anybody can just go put in raw information or raw queries into it. They're very pointed. They're very much focused on tasks, not on jobs, right? And that's another very key point, that Gen AI is, in our point of view today, the state-of-the-art technology is suitable for tasks, maybe even some complex tasks, but it certainly can't replace a job yet, because that encompasses parameters not only what you described, but many other elements to actually get the final outcome. So we've put in place a structure and a testing methodology for how Gen AI is used. And when it's deployed, like I said, it's task-centric. There's a process re-engineering attached to Gen AI adoption. So like, on commercial side, or actually any of the functions, if you look at the processes that are there, we re-engineer those where we bring in Gen AI at just those points where it makes sense and we can qualify it. We can measure it, we can control it, and we see some output from it. Almost always these systems involve human-in-the-loop type mechanisms. So whether it's a reinforcement learning through human feedback, or whether it's just a flow that goes through human curation and review, that is certainly there. So that's one end of it. The other end of it, which you were mentioning earlier, is the data infrastructure itself. So the quality of results we get from GenAI is highly dependent on the quality of data made available to it. And certainly there are mechanisms like retrieval augmentation and other types of approaches towards improving the reliability and accuracy of your GenAI. But all of that assumes that your data, your sources of truth, are well curated, and validated, controlled, and trustworthy. And so having the right mechanisms and the infrastructure in order to manage your sources of truth that feed your GenAI systems, that's a big contributor towards getting to what you're asking about, is making sure that I get valid and trustworthy outcomes from this. So certainly those elements are there, but we're also very, very careful today. We're using GenAI in specific areas where we can actually qualify, attach numbers, observability, all those elements to saying, I'm using GenAI to solve this task. It's now I'm seeing 30, 40% efficiency gain, but I'm also able to monitor it for compliance, for bias, for ethical issues, right? For example, I would not be comfortable having a pure chatbot as a primary point of care, right? I mean, I don't think
that's the thing, because the implications are very high, right? Especially with life sciences, and the objective of it is to kind of provide the right healthcare, right medication, right drugs to the society, as well as the right consultancy. The implications are very high. So this makes what you say makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So think about this. Like, let's suppose I'm looking at, let's say on the safety side, you're looking at a safety COMS form or one of these types of MedWatch these forms, right? So you have some structured data, and you have a narrative, whether it's a transcript from a patient phone call into a call center or a physician's notes. So one of your tasks is to see, all right, is the structured data that I have for this patient report consistent with the narrative that was put in unstructured text? Now people have tried to solve that using NLP and those techniques. It only gets you so far, but it's not enough to really solve for it. But here today, now with GenAI, can you set up through prompt engineering and RAG and whatever controls you want to put in place? Can I now basically accelerate that process? Can I actually then, for at least a case reviewer, the system could automatically flag, hey, I saw some inconsistencies in this patient's social history or in their medication. That is transformative in the business process. It makes a huge impact on what we call case processing, and there's analogies to that in other parts of the business, and that's through GenAI. But if you do that right, you have a big win, and it's possible, right? Because you have a very specific task. It's measurable. I can control it. I have a human in the loop process where it's validated, but I'm still saving somebody potentially 30 minutes of time by having this tool in place that augments their work.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tarun. I think this conversation has been really insightful. It kind of provided a very holistic perspective right from the start of where digitization started. And, I couldn't think of any better person to kind of ask the entire evolution to today, building some high-end technologies like GenAI, and then also understanding the responsibility of it. Thank you so much, Tarun, for making the time again.
My pleasure. Loved having a conversation.